It all started on a crisp autumn evening. The kind where the air smells faintly of smoke and wet leaves. The kind that makes the forest feel alive even when you're alone. I had always been a fan of solitude, of escaping the hum of the city to be completely alone with nature. But this time, I wanted more than just a weekend hike. I wanted to camp alone, deep in the woods, away from the crowded trails and the chatter of other campers. I picked a spot I'd heard about online, a small clearing near an old, rarely used trail, rumored to be untouched for years. It wasn't on any official map. I'd done my research, or so I thought. Friends warned me against going alone, citing everything from animal attacks to things that don't belong in the woods. I laughed it off. I've camped alone before, I told them. I'm careful. I know what I'm doing. Packing my bag that evening, I felt a mixture of excitement and unease. There was something thrilling about being fully responsible for my own safety, yet a small, nagging part of me whispered that maybe this was reckless. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving a fading orange glow over the treetops. The forest seemed welcoming at first, whispering in the wind through the branches. But as I hiked deeper, the trees grew denser, and the sounds of civilization faded into nothingness. I set up camp in a small clearing, just large enough for my tent, a fire pit, and a little space around it. As I worked, the forest seemed to grow quieter. No birds, no rustling of small animals, just the occasional crack of a distant branch. I shrugged it off as normal. I wasn't afraid yet. That first night, I remember lying in my sleeping bag, staring up at the dark canopy, the faint glow of the stars barely reaching me. The wind shifted, carrying a strange scent, earthy, yes, but mixed with something else, something metallic, almost like blood. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. That's when I heard it, a snapping of twigs, slow and deliberate, not like an animal brushing through the underbrush, but like someone stepping carefully, almost purposefully, toward my camp. I froze, my heart pounding so loud it seemed to echo in the empty clearing. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing. Just the silence of the woods pressing down on me, heavier than any blanket I'd ever slept under. Hours passed, and I told myself it was just an animal or the wind. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. By the time dawn crept through the trees, painting the forest in muted shades of gold and gray, I realized I wasn't just alone. I was being watched. The morning light did little to calm my nerves. I thought that once the sun was up, I'd see that the forest was just normal, but there was something off. My fire pit had been disturbed overnight, the ashes scattered in a way I didn't leave them. At first, I blamed the wind, but the logs had been shifted too, like someone or something had crouched there. I told myself again, I was imagining things. This was a survival instinct kicking in, heightening my senses in the solitude of the woods. I packed up quickly and decided to hike further along the trail I had marked on my map, hoping that moving would ease the paranoia. It wasn't long before I saw the first real sign that I wasn't alone. There were footprints in the mud, a set of human footprints, small but definite. They were fresh, not more than a few hours old, and they led deeper into the forest. My stomach dropped. My rational mind told me to follow the trail and see if I could catch another hiker or camper, but something instinctual, primal, screamed at me to turn back. I debated my options while trying to convince myself that whoever made the prints was probably just a local hiker. But as I followed the trail to the next bend, I noticed something chilling. Tree markings, carved not with a knife, but scratched into the bark with jagged, uneven lines. At first, it looked like random graffiti, but the pattern was deliberate, too methodical, too sharp. It was as if someone or something was leaving a message. By mid-afternoon, I decided I'd gone far enough. I turned back toward my campsite, heart thumping so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. That's when I heard the first voice. It was faint, barely audible, like a whisper carried by the wind. I froze, listening. "You shouldn't be here," it said. Not a real person, but a voice that slithered under my skin, cold and uneven, as if the forest itself had learned how to speak. I called out again, my voice shaking now. "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. The woods answered with nothing but the creak of branches and the occasional call of a crow. By the time I got back to my tent, the feeling of being watched had intensified. The clearing fell. As night fell, the whispers returned. Not just outside the tent now, but all around me. Sometimes close, sometimes far. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. Every distant crack of wood sounded like footsteps. Sleep was impossible. I lay there, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline, listening to the dark forest breathe around me. By the time darkness fully swallowed the forest, I was trembling, not just from cold, but from the sheer weight of dread pressing down on me. I had tried to keep busy earlier, arranging my supplies, checking my map, forcing myself to stay rational. But now, alone in the tent, every shadow outside seemed alive, every whisper carried intent. It started small, a distant scraping sound, like nails against bark. I froze, straining to hear. It grew louder, closer. My flashlight, which I kept pointed at the tent entrance, revealed nothing at first. But then I saw it, a shadow flitting between the trees, impossibly fast. Not like an animal, but like a figure crouching low, moving deliberately. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks. But then came the tapping. Soft at first, almost polite, against the outside of the tent. Then faster, insistent. I scrambled to unzip the flap, thinking maybe someone was lost, someone human. But no one was there. Just the empty clearing, the black trees, and the occasional rustle of leaves. That's when I noticed the footprints again. Dozens of them this time, circling my tent in a chaotic pattern. And they weren't all human. Some were smaller, too narrow, with long toes, the kind of imprint you couldn't get from any creature I'd ever seen. My stomach turned. I had heard of stories, vague warnings online about people who camped alone in remote forests, but I never thought. No, I refused to consider that something truly unexplainable could be real. The tapping became banging, like someone or something was trying to get in. I backed away from the tent walls, clutching my flashlight and a small hatchet I had brought just in case. And then came the whispering clear this time, unmistakable, surrounding me. "You shouldn't be here. Leave alone." I screamed, not caring if anyone heard. And in that moment, I realized the forest itself was against me. The air seemed heavier, the shadows deeper, as if every tree had leaned in closer to watch me, judge me, trap me. Then, the sound of footsteps running this time, fast and chaotic, circling the clearing. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the crunch of leaves, the snapping of branches, right outside the tent. My mind raced. Should I make a run for it? Stay put? Fight? Every instinct screamed to flee, but fear rooted me to the spot. I held my flashlight up and swung the tent flap open. Nothing. But then I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. Just a glimpse, a figure standing perfectly still, watching me. Not human, not quite animal. Its shape was wrong, elongated, distorted, like something meant to be human but twisted by the forest itself. And it disappeared before I could even blink. I ran. I don't even remember the trail anymore. Just running blindly through the trees, tripping over roots, branches slapping my face, my heart hammering like a drum in my chest. Behind me, I could hear it all following, whispering, sometimes silent, sometimes roaring in sudden bursts that made me stumble. By the time I stumbled into a small clearing that looked familiar, my tent was far behind me. My bag, my supplies, gone. and in the mud at the edge of the clearing, the footprints remained, circling, waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, crouched behind a fallen log, listening to the forest breathe, whisper, and stalk. I realized then, with a sinking horror, that I had been wrong. I wasn't just alone. I was prey. The next day, I barely dared move. My legs were raw from the night's sprint, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. But I knew staying put wasn't an option. Whatever had been circling me the night before wasn't gone. I could feel it, an oppressive presence in every shadow, every rustle of leaves. I tried retracing my steps, hoping to reach the main trail, but the forest had changed. Trees I was certain I had passed the day before now looked unfamiliar. The trail markers were gone, replaced by more of those jagged carvings on the tree symbols I didn't understand, but which seemed deliberately placed, guiding me or taunting me toward deeper darkness. Then I heard the laughter. Faint at first, almost human, but wrong. It echoed through the trees, overlapping itself, coming from multiple directions at once. It was playful, cruel, mocking. My stomach dropped. Whoever, whatever was here, it was toying with me. I stumbled upon a shallow stream and stopped to catch my breath. The water was murky, reflecting distorted images of the trees above. And then I saw it in the reflection, a figure standing behind me, but when I spun around, there was nothing there. Just the forest. My mind screamed that I was hallucinating, but the whispers in the trees told me otherwise. I tried calling out for help, my voice hoarse, shaking, but the forest swallowed every sound. No echoes, no response. I realized then, with a chilling clarity, that I was utterly alone and that help would never come. As the sun began to set again, I saw movement ahead. At first, I thought it was another camper, but it wasn't. It was the same twisted figure I had glimpsed the night before, standing at the edge of a small clearing, watching me. Its head tilted unnaturally, and it didn't move like a human should. My legs froze. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Then I noticed something else. More figures emerging from the trees, dozens of them, just at the edge of vision. They didn't walk. They slithered, moved in unnatural angles, their whispers overlapping into a horrifying chorus. "You don't belong here. Leave or stay forever." Panic overtook me. I turned and ran blindly, crashing through underbrush, my skin scratched raw by branches. The forest seemed alive now, guiding me, corralling me, trapping me in its dark heart. Every sound behind me, the crunch of leaves, the snapping of twigs, the whispers, was closer, faster, relentless. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Time lost meaning. I was lost, disoriented, every direction looking the same. Endless trees, shadows that moved against the grain of light, and then I tripped. I fell hard, scraping my hands and knees, and looked up to see the figures closing in, emerging from the trees like ghosts. I screamed, but my voice sounded small, swallowed by the immense breathing forest. And then, nothing. For a moment, the figures paused, as if studying me. And then they receded, melting back into the shadows. I didn't understand why they let me go, but I didn't question it. I just ran blindly until I found a path I recognized, a faint trail I had passed on the way in. I collapsed there, sobbing, exhausted, broken. My camp was gone. My supplies were gone. The forest seemed calm now, almost mocking in its quiet, as if it had never been alive, as if I had imagined the entire nightmare. But I knew better. I had felt it, the eyes, the whispers, the unnatural movements of something that didn't belong in the real world. I don't remember how long I walked before I finally stumbled onto the main trail. My legs were shredded, my hands cut and bleeding, my clothes torn. Every step was agony, but I didn't stop. I didn't dare look back. The forest was quiet now, eerily quiet, like it had swallowed its own breath. By the time I reached the ranger station hours later, I was covered in mud and scratches, shaking uncontrollably. The ranger looked at me with concern, asking what had happened. I tried to explain, but the words sounded insane even to me. Figures, voices, something watching me, I stammered. He nodded politely, assuming I'd gotten lost or had a bad scare. I tried to show him my campsite on the map, but the spot I had carefully marked didn't exist anymore. The area was just dense forest, untouched, with no sign that anyone had camped there recently. No fire pit, no tent, nothing. It was as if the forest had erased every trace of my presence. In the weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every wind through the trees, every rustle outside my window, made my heart hammer. Friends noticed I had changed, more quiet, more jittery, always scanning shadows. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself I had hallucinated or that sleep deprivation had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I had experienced was real. I returned to the woods once, during daylight, with a friend, trying to find the clearing again. We hiked for hours, but the trail was gone, replaced by endless forest that looked familiar and yet completely alien. There were no carvings, no footprints, no traces of the figures I had seen. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed the nightmare, leaving only me to remember it. Even now, years later, the memories haunt me. I can't walk alone in the woods without that creeping dread pressing on my chest. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear whispers just beyond the window, calling my name, reminding me that the forest is patient, that it waits. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that if I ever returned alone, it would be ready. Watching, waiting. I went into those woods seeking solitude and adventure, but I found something else entirely, something alive, something intelligent, something that did not want me there. And I survived, but only barely. That night, and those days in the forest, changed me forever. I learned the truth that some places are not meant for humans, and some things in the world, though we might try to rationalize them, are beyond understanding and dangerously alive when left alone. I still hike, I still love nature, but I will never ever camp alone in the deep woods again. Not after knowing what's really out there. I had always loved the idea of camping alone. The quiet, the isolation, the escape from everyone else's noise. It felt like freedom. So when I found a small, remote trail deep in the national forest, I thought it would be the perfect weekend getaway. No maps, no crowds, just me and the trees. I set out in the early morning, the sun just beginning to burn away the fog that lingered in the valley. The trailhead was nearly empty, just an old sign with paint peeling, warning hikers that the path was difficult and rarely maintained. That excited me. Rarely maintained meant untouched, natural. Just what I wanted. The first few hours were serene. Birds called from the treetops, the wind whispered through the leaves, and the only sounds were my boots crunching on fallen twigs. But as I ventured deeper, I noticed something odd. The trail wasn't as clear as it had seemed. Trees leaned over it in unnatural angles, branches crisscrossing like skeletal arms. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of broken underbrush, as if something or someone had passed through recently. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was wildlife. But then, as I climbed over a steep ridge, I spotted footprints. At first, I thought they were mine from the day before, but the prints were fresher, smaller, delicate in a way that didn't match any animal I knew. They didn't go far, just a short path into the trees, then vanished. I set up camp in a small clearing by a stream, a place that seemed safe and peaceful. As I pitched my tent, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Everything was quiet, too quiet. I tried to focus on starting a small fire, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And then I heard it, a low, deliberate crunch of footsteps outside the clearing. Not hurried like an animal, but careful, slow, deliberate like whoever it was wanted to be seen, or wanted me to think they could be seen. I froze. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound away, but my heart hammered as if it were trying to escape my chest. I told myself it was a hiker passing by. That was all. Just someone else in the woods. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. As night fell, the forest transformed. The peaceful rustling of leaves became a constant whisper, a low murmur that seemed to surround my campsite. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, but every shadow looked alive, every branch bent in impossible angles. I built a small fire, hoping its warmth and light would keep me calm. The flames flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the clearing. But no matter how I positioned myself, the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Then I heard a soft, deliberate tapping at the edge of the clearing. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hands. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. Nothing, just silence. Minutes later, the tapping returned, louder this time, closer. I unzipped my tent and peered out into the darkness. Nothing, only the faint outline of trees, swaying gently. But then I saw it, a shape moving just beyond the reach of my light, crouched low, too fast and deliberate to be an animal. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help, but there was no signal, no GPS, nothing. I was completely cut off. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and disbelief. Could this really be happening? Was I imagining it? Then came the whispering. Faint at first, almost polite but unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here. Alone? Leave." The voice or voices seemed to come from all directions at once, circling me, pressing in. I jumped back inside the tent, my hands trembling, my mind screaming to escape. I tried to calm myself, thinking maybe it was some prankster, a hiker playing tricks. But deep down, I knew. The forest was alive in a way that wasn't natural. Something had noticed me, and it was waiting. Hours passed. The tapping, the whispers, the shifting shadows, they never stopped. Sleep was impossible. I stayed huddled in my sleeping bag, clutching a flashlight and a small pocket knife. Every nerve in my body screaming that I was in real danger. By dawn, I realized I couldn't stay. I had to leave, but as I packed up, I noticed something chilling. My firewood had been disturbed, arranged in small piles around the clearing. Not random, purposeful. Someone or something had been here all night watching. I tried to convince myself to stay calm as I hiked back toward the main trail. Daylight usually brings a sense of safety, but in this forest, it felt like the sun itself was dimmed, filtered through a canopy so thick it swallowed light. The air was heavy, almost sticky, and the silence between the occasional bird calls felt unnatural. Then I saw them, or at least I think I did. Shadows darting just beyond the trees, too quick for the eye to catch clearly. Not animals, too precise, too deliberate. They weren't moving like creatures of the forest. They were watching me, keeping pace without ever fully revealing themselves. My heart hammered in my chest, my breath ragged. Every instinct screamed to run, but I knew if I ran blindly, I could get lost or worse, run straight into them. And then came the first sound that truly froze me. A soft, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the forest floor. Not behind me, not in front of me, everywhere. It echoed unnaturally through the trees, and I realized it wasn't one sound. It was many, overlapping, circling. I stumbled onto a clearing, hoping it would give me space to gather my thoughts. But the clearing was wrong. Twigs and branches were arranged in patterns, deliberate symbols carved into the bark, and footprints, dozens of them, circled the area. Human? Some of them looked human, but others were elongated, clawed, impossible to belong to any creature I'd ever seen. I froze, realizing that whatever had been stalking me had been here first. Watching, planning, waiting. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping into a chorus. Leave or stay forever. You don't belong here. Alone? Panic overtook me. I broke into a run, crashing through underbrush, twisting an ankle, my flashlight swinging wildly. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel them following just beyond sight, their presence pressing against me like a physical weight. Hours passed. My path became unfamiliar, the trail disappearing entirely. Every direction looked the same. Endless trees, shadows that seemed to bend and shift unnaturally. The forest wasn't just big, it was alive, and it was hunting me. At some point, I tripped over a root and fell face first into the mud. I lifted my head, terrified, and glimpsed something that made my blood run cold. A figure, standing still, motionless, observing me. Its shape was vaguely human, but distorted. Too tall, limbs too long, movements too smooth, too deliberate. And then, in a blink, it was gone. I realized, with a sinking horror, that this forest had a memory. It remembered me. It remembered every step I took. And it wasn't done with me yet. By the time evening fell, I was exhausted, scraped, bleeding, and trembling from more than just fatigue. My attempts to follow the faint trail had failed. Every turn led me deeper into a maze of trees that all looked identical. The sun dipped below the treetops, and the shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching in ways that made the forest feel alive. I tried to set up a small shelter against a fallen tree, anything to protect myself. But as I unpacked my bag, I noticed something horrifying. The small clearing I had chosen was already littered with fresh twigs, arranged in deliberate, almost ritualistic patterns, and surrounding them, footprints. Hundreds of them. They weren't all human. Some were small, some elongated, some clawed, all leading toward me. The whispers started again, low at first, then rising into a harsh, overlapping chant. You shouldn't be here. Alone? Stay. I grabbed my flashlight and turned in every direction, swinging it frantically. Nothing, but I could feel them, watching, calculating, waiting. My mind screamed to run, but every instinct told me that running blindly would only make it worse. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling me. Not one pair, but many. They didn't crumple leaves or snap branches, just moved in silence. Unnervingly light, but close enough that I could hear the faint crunch of each step. And then I saw movement at the edge of my light. A figure, crouched unnaturally low, limbs bent in impossible angles. Its face. I don't even know if it had a face. Dark, blurred, shifting like shadows had taken form. It tilted its head slowly, studying me, waiting for something. I screamed and bolted through the trees, tripping, falling, scraping my body raw on the branches. Behind me, the crunch of footsteps increased, overlapping, echoing unnaturally. I didn't dare look back. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. Hours or maybe minutes passed. I don't know how long I ran. Finally, I stumbled into a faint trail that looked like it might lead out. My heart leapt with relief, but I was too exhausted to celebrate. The forest was quiet again, eerily quiet, and for the first time, I thought maybe I had lost them. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The forest hadn't released me. It had only let me live. For now, I emerged from the trees just before dawn, my body covered in scratches and dirt, my clothes shredded, and my mind numb with exhaustion and terror. The trail finally opened onto a dirt road I recognized, the one that led to the ranger station. I collapsed there, gasping for air, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The ranger who found me looked alarmed but skeptical. What happened? He asked. I tried to explain. The whispers, the footsteps, the figures, the carved symbols, the shadows that moved unnaturally. My voice trembled as I recounted everything, but he kept shaking his head. "Sounds like you got lost out there, friend," he said. Could have been exhaustion or stress, but I knew the truth. I hadn't imagined it. I had felt the presence, something alive, intelligent, and malevolent in the woods. Something that watched, hunted, and waited. My campsite, my supplies, everything had vanished. Even the small clearing I had chosen seemed erased, swallowed back into the forest as if it had never existed. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my house sounded like footsteps. Every rustle outside my window was the forest, whispering, reminding me it was still out there. Friends noticed I'd changed. I was jumpy, silent, always scanning shadows. I couldn't explain it, and I stopped trying. I never returned to that forest. I tried once, years later, during daylight, with a friend guiding me. We couldn't find the trail. The trees were denser, the clearing gone. No sign of my tent, no carvings, nothing. It was as if the forest itself had erased a nightmare, leaving only my memory. Even now, years later, I can't walk alone in the woods without that cold, crawling feeling pressing against me. I sometimes hear whispers in the wind, faint and insistent, and I know the forest remembers me. It waits, patient, eternal, and I know deep down, if I ever return alone, it will be ready, watching, waiting. I went into those woods seeking solitude and peace. Instead, I found something that doesn't want humans there, something alive in a way the mind can't comprehend. And I survived, but only barely. That night changed me forever. Somewhere out there, the forest still lives, and it's still hungry for the ones who wander in alone. For days, I had felt off an unease I couldn't explain. My sleep was restless, my mind restless, and even the familiar noises of the city seemed too loud, too chaotic. That's when the idea came to me. Maybe I needed to get away, to escape completely, to be alone in the woods. Just me, nature, and silence. I didn't tell anyone I was going. It felt like something private, something necessary. I packed my bag quickly, tent, sleeping bag, flashlight, and some food, and drove to a remote trail I'd found online. It was supposed to be isolated, untouched, perfect for a solo trip. The first part of the hike was easy, almost serene. Sunlight filtered through the trees, birds sang overhead, and the air smelled of damp earth. But as I went deeper, a subtle feeling crept in like the forest itself was watching me. Shadows shifted oddly. Branches bent in ways they shouldn't. Occasionally, I thought I saw movement, but every time I looked, nothing was there. By late afternoon, I found a small clearing beside a narrow stream. It felt perfect for my tent, yet the unease grew heavier. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made me startle. I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, the result of being alone. That night, lying in my sleeping bag, I heard the first footsteps slow, careful, circling the clearing. I froze. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Silence answered, then a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." I stayed awake the rest of the night, flashlight clutched tightly, listening to the forest breathe and waiting for the unknown presence that I knew was near. Morning came, but it brought little comfort. The forest felt heavier now, the air thicker, as if the trees themselves were watching me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the isolation, maybe my imagination, but an gnawing feeling in my gut told me otherwise. As I explored a little farther from my clearing, I noticed footprints, small, precise, and fresh. Not human, not animal. They led toward my tent, then vanished. My pulse quickened. My rational mind tried to explain it. Maybe a hiker, maybe a deer, but deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. Then came the scratching. Faint at first, like claws on wood, coming from the edge of the trees. I froze, listening. The sound grew louder, deliberate, as if something or someone was testing me, gauging how I'd react. I returned to my camp, heart pounding. My firewood, which I had neatly stacked, was scattered in small piles around the clearing. The arrangement wasn't random. Someone or something had been there, and they had left a message I couldn't understand. Night fell again, and with it came the whispers. Soft at first, then louder, closer. Alone, leave. You don't belong here. I tried to convince myself it was a prankster, a wandering hiker, but the forest had never felt so hostile. The shadows moved unnaturally, stretching and bending. The wind carried voices that didn't belong to the wind. Sleep was impossible. I huddled in my tent, clutching my flashlight, listening to the forest breathe around me, knowing I wasn't safe. By late afternoon, I knew I couldn't stay in one place. Every step away from the clearing only made the forest feel denser, tighter, like it was closing in on me. The trail I thought I knew disappeared beneath overgrown roots and fallen branches, and the trees all began to look the same, indistinguishable from one another. Then I heard it, a soft rustling behind me, quick and deliberate. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the shadows, but nothing moved, just the forest, eerily still. My pulse pounded, every nerve screaming that I was being followed. I stumbled into a small clearing and froze. The ground was covered with footprints, human and inhuman, some small and delicate, some elongated, clawed, impossible to belong to anything normal. And scattered among them were branches and twigs, arranged in jagged patterns like some twisted ritual. A sudden snap of a branch made me jump. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A dark figure crouched low, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Too tall, limbs too long, too fluid to be human. I blinked and it vanished, leaving only the whispering voices. Leave or stay forever. You don't belong here. Alone? I ran. I didn't know where, only away from the clearing, crashing through branches, tripping over roots, my heart hammering so loudly it felt like the forest itself could hear it. Behind me, faint footsteps followed, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, never letting up. Hours or maybe minutes passed. Time lost meaning. Every direction looked the same. Endless, twisting trees, shadows bending unnaturally, whispering my name. The forest wasn't just hostile. It was hunting me, and I had no idea if I would ever escape. Night fell faster than I expected, swallowing the forest in shadows so deep they felt solid. I tried to find another clearing to rest, but every step seemed to lead me in circles. The trees leaned in unnaturally, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Then the whispers returned, this time all around me, overlapping into a chorus. Alone? Leave. Stay. I could feel them before I saw them. Figures just at the edge of my vision, moving too fluidly, too fast to be human. Every instinct screamed to run, but I was exhausted, my body scraped and bleeding from branches. I stumbled into a small clearing that looked familiar, but it wasn't my campsite. Twigs and branches had been arranged in jagged, deliberate patterns again, surrounding the footprints that led toward me. The forest had been waiting, and now I understood. It wasn't going to let me go. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Too tall, limbs impossibly long, its movements deliberate and unnatural. I screamed and bolted through the trees, tripping over roots, my lungs burning. Behind me, I could hear multiple sets of footsteps, soft, precise, and relentless. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing near a faint trail I hoped led out. The figures didn't follow immediately. They waited, watching from the shadows. I stayed low, heart hammering, flashlight clutched, listening to the forest breathe around me, knowing they were still out there. By the time I forced myself to keep moving, I realized something terrifying. The forest hadn't released me. It had only allowed me a chance to survive, for now. I finally stumbled onto a faint trail just as the first light of dawn broke through the treetops. My body was scraped, bruised, and trembling. Every step felt heavy, every breath sharp with fear and exhaustion. I didn't look back, I didn't dare. The forest had shown me its presence, its intelligence, and I knew better than to linger. Hours later, I reached the ranger station. The rangers looked concerned but skeptical. I tried to explain the whispers, the figures, the footprints, the unnatural shapes, but my words sounded insane even to me. "You got lost, that's all," one ranger said. Exhaustion can do strange things to the mind, but I knew better. My campsite, my tent, my supplies, everything was gone. The forest had erased all traces of my presence, leaving only me to remember. In the days that followed, I couldn't sleep. Every wind, every rustle outside my window made my heart race. I couldn't walk alone in the woods without feeling that same cold, crawling presence. I sometimes hear whispers carried by the wind, faint but insistent, reminding me that the forest remembers me. I never returned. I still love the outdoors, but I will never, ever camp alone in the deep woods again. That night taught me that some places are not meant for humans. Some things that live there are alive in ways the mind cannot understand, and they wait. Patient and eternal, for anyone foolish enough to wander alone. The forest didn't just scare me. It changed me forever.